Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm so glad that you're here because together we're going to work through big stuff. Hello there, and welcome to Big Stuff, where today we're going to be diving into a listener question with how are you really? But first, how am I really? It's been a fortnight, my friends. It has been a fortnight. I got a virus, which very unsatisfyingly didn't register anything on a RAT test, but I'm fairly sure it was COVID because I felt wretched. But I'm back. I'm feeling great. I've had some excellent night's sleep, and I am ready to tackle this excellent listener question. He wrote in, I love earning money. Yay, I get that. Me too. I love earning money, but I don't aggressively chase it. What motivates me more is appreciation, being seen as helpful and genuine. But sometimes I wonder, am I limiting myself financially because of this mindset? How do you balance purpose and ambition? And I read that question and I thought to myself that it is such a familiar place because I personally have felt that myself at times. I have felt that I have been sitting in a place of wanting acknowledgement for the work I'm doing and feeling satisfied by the work that I'm doing because I'm seeing the results of it, but also finding it very, very difficult to either charge more, raise my prices, or ask for what I feel, or ask for even industry standard and what I'm worth, and need to just accept what people give. I also see it happening with friends and clients. I see people struggling to ask for a raise after, a certain period of time, or perhaps their role changes or somebody leaves and they're taking on more work and they're not getting any sort of monetary recompense for that. It's not commensurate with the amount of work that they're doing. Or I'm seeing people in their own businesses who are creating offers and struggling to put prices on them. I actually even had a conversation with somebody recently who was creating an event, and she said, I'm really struggling to ask people to pay to come to this event. I feel like I should just be inviting people and they can come for nothing, but it's going to cost me $20,000 to put it on. And I was like, where is the resistance coming in and feeling like you can ask for people to chip in for that, because you're creating an entire event. Anyway, if you've ever told yourself that you feel like you're just not someone who is motivated by money, that you care more about impact than income, and then quietly wondered if that's actually true, or if you're shortchanging yourself, then today's episode is for you. Let's start by acknowledging that pushback on money, or how you feel about money, is very real and very true. And it happens for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think the world has a very specific definition of success a lot of the time, and it's almost entirely a monetary thing. We often look at status and money as the measures of success. So if you're someone who is not particularly interested in either status or money, then it may feel like you never hit what the society at large deems to be success, a successful position, or certainly a successful bank account. We often think about people who charge a lot. Maybe they do something similar to us and they charge a lot. I see it obviously in the coaching industry a lot. And then we think maybe the people who charge like little are either humble or not as good, right? So there is also the idea that the value of something is often like in alignment with how good it's going to be. All right. So we might also think that somebody who charges less is maybe not serious about their career. You know, when you see somebody who charges hourly versus charging in like packages and things like that, it's like, well, maybe they're not serious, or maybe they're not being coached by business coaches. Like, who knows? Either way, we know that often our ideas about our own worth can be tied up really tightly with how we feel about money. And that can be complicated because often our money stories are tied up with a lot of historical stuff, potentially our parents' financial status, our parents' beliefs about money. So when we're in a position or in a place where we are questioning our own relationship with success, with money, with acknowledgement, with value, all of that sort of stuff, it's not as simple as like a two-dimensional equation. There's a lot wrapped up in it. And women, we tell to like charge your worth and know what you're worth and like all of that sort of stuff. You know, respect yourself, value what you do. We say all of that sort of stuff. And then there's the actual, I guess, skills and the confidence, but also the communication skills to feel like you can ask for more money in a way that doesn't feel icky. It doesn't feel grabby. It doesn't feel greedy, because all of these words kind of get tied up with money. So it can be really, really tricky. It's often a way that people also validate themselves is seeing bigger numbers on invoices, right? So where do we, like, how do we unravel, unpick? But what I really want to be diving into more today is around the idea of value, worth, and fear. Okay. So if you're someone who genuinely finds great satisfaction in the thank you, great satisfaction in seeing somebody happy with the work that you've done, being acknowledged in that, if you find that more satisfying than a financial transaction, then you actually have probably spent some time wondering what is wrong with you because of all the messaging that we receive from the world, okay? The world at large. Now, there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with being meaning motivated or being acknowledgement motivated. I love acknowledgement. I love a client sending me a message saying, ever since I've been working with you, my life has really changed. Thank you so much. I can't believe how much ease there is in my life. I can't believe how relaxed I am now, and I used to be stressed. All of that is so satisfying to my soul. If getting acknowledgement for job well done, effort put in is a love language or is your jam, then that's amazing. That's fabulous. Okay. There is nothing wrong with that. It is a legitimate form of payback for the energy and the effort that you're putting into something. Some of the most extraordinary human beings on the planet are working either in a voluntary capacity or just not doing it for the money. Okay. Some of the most meaningful and important jobs or efforts, tasks in the world, people are not doing for money. Now, does that mean that they are bad business people, not business minded? No, it just means that their motivation is different to what society tells us brings success. That's amazing. It's interesting. There's nothing wrong with that. But if we go a little bit deeper on this idea, obviously we all need money. We need fun dollars, right? We need the freedom. We need to pay our bills. Cost of living is insane. Petrol's going through the roof. We need to pay. We need money. Everybody needs money. We are living in a society where money is freedom. So if it's not something that you value highly, that is not a problem. But if you are working more or putting in much more effort or over delivering without asking for what you are worth, then there may be something a little bit deeper that we need to be considering. Here's something that I have learned from both my own life and also from working with the hundreds of women that I've worked with. And that is that sometimes values and fear can get sort of wrapped up in like the same kind of costume, say. They can look identical from the outside. And you can tell yourself that it is a values-based decision when in actual fact it is your fear speaking. So what do we mean by that? If we look at somebody who says, I'm not money motivated and I'm afraid of what happens if I ask for more money, then we are potentially looking at the same behavior, right? The same outcome. The same outcome, which is undercharging, the same outcome, which is over delivering, holding back, feeling like there are other people doing the same thing as you who are making considerably more money. So you're quietly swallowing the discomfort of being underpaid and telling yourself the story that you are not motivated by money. Can you see how that can be a tricky thing? So you can't really tell those two things apart by looking at someone's work, their effort, or their bank account. They are sort of deeper psychological and belief-driven things at play. Does that make sense? Let me tell you about my own story. So when I first started coaching, I was undercharging because I was new. Okay, that makes sense, right? I was new. I wanted to get runs on the board. I wanted to practice my skills. I wanted to prove to myself that this is something that I can do, right? This is something that I'm actually good at. And so over time, as I began to prove that, as I began to have the runs on the board, I was working with clients who were having amazing results. I had the evidence that I was worthy, right? I had the evidence that what I was doing was good work and that all of these concepts that I had studied, that I had learned, that I had sort of put together into my own programs, it was effective. Okay, so yay, that's great. What I didn't do after a certain period of time was change how much I was charging now that I had the evidence that I was doing good. All right. And what that meant was I was seeing other coaches out there doing similar things. And in fact, I was seeing other coaches who I knew were doing things differently to me, as in non-ethically, less thoroughly, less trauma-informed, right? I was seeing people not as good as me, essentially, in my own humble opinion, right? Not as good as me, charging way more than me. And I started to like, I guess, not resent the industry, but I started to have like these feelings like, you know, there's not enough regulation in the industry. People can be just charging whatever they want. It's not, these people aren't safe. And I was looking at them thinking the problem was with them, when in actual fact, the problem was with me charging in a way that was undervaluing both my own learnings, my own experience, but also the entire industry. When you charge below the industry standard in your field, you are undervaluing everybody working in it, right? Not just you, everybody. And that can be really hard as an entrepreneur or somebody with their own business who still doesn't have the confidence in what they're doing to charge at least the industry standard, if not more. This isn't about charging exorbitantly so that you make the most, that you're ripping people off. Although my own business coach has a book, Andrew Griffiths has a book called Somebody Has to Be the Most Expensive. It might as well be you. I think that's the best book title that ever booked. But I sat with that for a while before charging more. Within my own story that I was just sharing, I sat with it for a while because it felt uncomfortable to me in every direction. It felt uncomfortable to charge more, and it felt uncomfortable to be judging other people in the industry as, making considerably more money but not doing it ethically or in a trauma-informed way, right? So I didn't feel like they were as good as me, but they were charging a lot more money. And sitting in that space of like resentment around that is like, it didn't feel good. It created that real sort of conflict and that real rub. And if I'm honest, it wasn't just because I was really living in that, I just care about impact. I just care about helping people. I just care about making a difference, even though that is a really deep motivator for my work. There was a real fear around asking for the money that I am worth, right? There was a real fear around raising prices to the industry standard. But I see this with clients often who have their yearly review. They know that the industry standard or other people even in their businesses, other people in their companies are earning, because people talk, right? They know that people are earning, people in the same position as them or people similar. They know what they're earning, and they, rather than get curious and find out, what do I need to do in order to earn that, they start to devalue themselves and get really awkward about the money conversation. I think with me, one of the biggest fears that I had around all of that was people thinking that I am greedy, people thinking that I am arrogant, up myself, money grabber, all of that sort of stuff, which is that money story that we sometimes get, which is that, money, wanting to be paid more money is somehow a negative thing. I feel like when we allow that story to be true, it creates that real disconnect between the meaning, like finding meaning in what you do, and finding the value in yourself for how you do it. And when you can't ask to be remunerated in a way that is fair or even more than fair, right? That's cool too. All of this fear story comes up. And that keeps you very stuck. It keeps you very stuck because knowing your value, knowing the meaning of what you do, knowing how you help people, and ultimately everybody is helping somebody, right? And all the things that all the jobs that we do, we are helping in some way. But knowing that you help people and finding value in that is great. That is your value set. That is your values as a human. I like to be able to help. And then being afraid of money, asking for remuneration is money wounding. And money wounding can run really deep. And being at, and telling yourself that they are the same story or the same thing can really keep you very stuck. So to the listener who wrote in with this, thank you for your vulnerable question. But I want to turn this back on you and anyone who struggles to ask for money or struggles to have the money conversation with their work, with in any context. You know, sometimes like your money stories can play out in all sorts of different contexts. They can really play out in your relationships and your romantic relationships. So I ask you, like, genuinely, not rhetorically, genuinely, which of these stories is playing out in you, do you think? And is it possible that both can be true at the same time? Because we're not singly faceted creatures, okay, multifaceted. You can be genuinely a meaning motivated person and have worth that's really like hitching a ride on that story, okay? The goal isn't to become someone who madly chases money and that version of success that society sells you as the only one. Certainly not chasing money just for money's sake. But the goal here, I think, is to be really honest with yourself. So here's a question that I invite you to really sit with this week. Think of one specific moment, right? Is there a negotiation somewhere that you didn't push back on? Is there a rate that you set too low or a rate that you agreed to, which you then knew that you had absolutely undersold yourself, or an opportunity that you really didn't back yourself in? And ask yourself honestly, like, was I honoring my values or was I avoiding a hard conversation? Maybe you could even ask yourself, what was I afraid would happen if I asked for more money? And really like let that percolate, right? Let that whole sort of question really percolate and think about different times, maybe write them down, times where, and you can tell, right? You can tell because you get maybe halfway through the job or you get sort of towards the end of a period of time and resentment grows because if the effort is not worth the reward, right? If you're not getting paid out for the amount of effort, resentment builds there, right? No matter how much you love it, unless the deal is I'm doing something voluntarily or I know I'm going into this because this is financially within the constraints of what is possible. But if you really honestly feel like you've undersold yourself, it starts to get a bit on the nose. No doubt about it. I've done that many times. And by the end of it, you're like, this freaking job, man. But then because some of my listeners I know are feelers and some of my listeners are going to be sort of more logic based, more sort of heady, I have an action. I have an action for you. And maybe if you want to be like a gold star student, you could do both of these actions. So here's the feely question. I want you to sit down with a piece of paper and answer this, right? Sit and really think about it for a minute. I want to ask for what I'm worth, but I am afraid of, right? X, Y, Z, right? I'm afraid this might happen. I want to ask for more money, but I'm afraid this might happen. And write all the things down, okay? And they don't have to make sense to anyone but you. No one is going to see this, right? So if you're afraid that you might get fired, if you're afraid that someone else will they'll get rid of you and bring in somebody cheaper, somebody, if you're afraid that people will think something of you. Like, it doesn't have to make any sense to anyone else. Just write it all down, okay? And then I invite you to get some evidence, right? Go and look up what 3, 4, 5 people in your industry at your level, what are they charging? And just see, are you kind of in the ballpark, or are you wildly under or even over? Because sometimes we go about this idea even just kind of guessing without having the evidence to know, where am I sitting in my industry? Where am I sitting in my field? And it's okay if you're at the higher end. It's okay if you're in the middle end. It's okay if you're at the lower end. But if you don't know, you don't know. But when you see those numbers, right, when you find the answer to this question, notice, what do you feel, right? What do you feel in your body? Do you feel shame? Do you feel surprised? Do you feel defensive? Do you feel excited? Do you feel like there is an opening or a possibility for you to have some conversations to raise that up, even just a little bit? The reaction that you have to this information is just data, but that data is going to tell you something really interesting about what your brain may be trying to hide from you. So my beautiful listener who wrote in with this question, I want to thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for asking us, how can we balance purpose and ambition? And I really want you to be left with this idea, right? Purpose and ambition, they're not opposites. They exist harmoniously when you have your heart set and your mindset in the right place. There is a version of you who can do your best work and charge really well for it without selling out. And that version is simply a person who's decided that their contribution has value. And that is a very, very important distinction. And you're allowed to value yourself. You're allowed to say that out loud. You're allowed to ask people to value you as well. It's not greed. And I think that is something that everybody really needs to understand. Everybody with money stories where they think wanting money, wanting more money, chasing money, having money is greed. It's not. It's freedom, and charging what you are worth is self-respect. So if you have any questions you want to send in, you want to share with me, how are you really? I would love to sit and coach wherever you're at. Throw some ideas around and give us all some ideas on how we can deal with some of this big stuff, and we can all live juicy out, happy out, more contented lives with more freedom. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode of Big Stuff as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, it would really help me if you wanted to share it with just one person that you think is going to get something out of it. And also feel free to drop a comment. All of these things really help podcasts to gain more ears, and that's what we're really here for. Also, be sure to subscribe, then you will never miss an episode. If you want to find out more about me, who I am, what I do, then you can go and check me out at daniellecolley.com.au. I'll see you next episode for more big stuff.